about you here.
All right, you gonna put me in the background for a minute?
No, you can stay right there. Everybody can see your pretty face.
Well,
So,
I forgot.
all right, guys. We are waiting for people to come on in, and I've been already listening to Les tell some stories, and we hope we get a decent crowd in here. They usually don't want to show up unless I'm doing bourbon or something. But Tina's here. My wife is in the house, and so that's cool. But I have with me tonight, fast becoming a good friend, is Les Odell. And let me tell you about Les a little bit. I first saw Les on one of the mountain, or was it Small Town Monsters episodes, and I was like, man, this dude really knows what he's talking about. And then I went up to the Sutton Museum, and they talked about you up there, and what a big supporter of that Bigfoot Museum in Sutton. And then I went back up and I picked up your book, and I love this book. It's the Old Man of the Mountain, and you're looking at the author right there. And I consider Les the top researcher in West Virginia, and probably one of the top researchers in America. And he's been busy giving speeches around West Virginia lately. So Les, thanks for coming in. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And we're gonna get into it right away. And if you guys have any questions, and Tina says, "Hey, Les." Tina's probably all I do is talk about Les Odell. So Tina's my wife, and so really cool. So. And if people don't come in tonight, it'll be up there kind of like a podcast, and they can watch it later. So that'll be cool too. So my question is for Les right away is, what really got you into Bigfoot and then your other cryptid and other strange encounters? What got you into that to begin with?
Well, it's nothing like what you would think. Like most people that are into this subject, basically started out either they've had a sighting, for the most part, or they've watched like In Search Of. I mean, that's the one that everybody brings up is In Search Of, and or they've watched the Patterson-Gimlin film and they remember seeing that as a kid. Me, it was completely different. I really didn't have even an interest in it, to be honest. What started with me was more. I got into the paranormal stuff. I had an experience as a kid with what a lot of people call a shadow person. I was about 7 or 8 years old. I can't remember if I was 7 or 8. I just remember I was in second grade. I don't remember exactly the time period, but we had moved into this farmhouse, and it was clear at the head of this holler called Michael's Hill here in Marion County, West Virginia, and the house just gave me the weirdest vibe when we got there, and eventually, or I can't say eventually, over some time, I started having some experiences, and the first experience I had were like the feeling of being watched, or like if I walked past a dark room, I just felt like something was going to jump out and grab me. And a lot of people was like, "Oh, that's just your overactive imagination for a young kid." But it eventually got to the point where my brother and I shared a bedroom, and we had bunk beds, and we would go to bed, and I started seeing these shadows on the opposite wall I'll shorten it up here a little bit so we don't have to go through a whole.
No, you're fine.
Go
We
through.
got all night.
And I started, and well, anyway, okay, I'll start. The house was old. It was an old 1800 and some odd farmhouse. I don't remember how old. Had some outbuildings. Had a big red barn. Had a big smoke cellar. We had an outhouse. We had a big chicken coop. We had tractor barns, field and stuff, and surrounded by these big pine trees. Just an awesome place, as a kid. I mean, because you had room to run, things we could, we'd play in the barn or play in the buildings and stuff. But the house itself just gave me the creeps. And the inside of the house, you walked into the back room, which led you, or walked in the back door, which led you into the kitchen, then into the living room. We had a fireplace in the living room. We had a sun porch on the front of it. And then there was 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And then there was like this, not a loft, but the upstairs, the roof peaked. And there was a small attic room up there that had stairs that went up to it. And it had, instead of flip switches, it had push button lights. Just like these little round buttons. Mm-hmm. Well, the switch for my brother and I's room had a delay in it. I guess a contact or something something was goofy. And you would push the button and you had like 2 seconds, 3 seconds before it clicked the light off. And I remember, because I always felt creepy. I was grateful for that because I'd click that light and I'd take off running and jump into bed. And then the light would kick off. But then my brother he'd sleep on a top bunk. Well, as you walked in the door, the bed was on the left-hand wall in the corner, the far corner. There's a window on that wall about midways of the wall. And then directly across from where the bed was at, the wall where the bed was at, there was my mom called it armoire, is what she called it. There was no closets in the house. We just had furniture like that. And that was on the far wall. But my brother slept on the top bunk. I slept on the bottom. And at some point I started seeing these shadows, and they weren't like figures. Like, you would think, people were talking about shadow figures. They were only about 2 feet tall or so. And they would move along the wall, the one where the armoire was. And it just, from start at one corner and go across, and like they was going to the other wall and disappear. Well, I would freak out. I'd cover my head up, I'd hide. For some reason, when I tried to scream for my dad, I couldn't even scream for my dad. I mean, I was that terrified. Oh, and wow. Eventually, I guess, just complete fright and being wore out, I'd fall asleep, or if I'd look again, they would be gone. Well, that happened a few times, and I do remember 3, and then eventually, or why do I keep on saying eventually? And then at one point, when I was noticing them, I looked in the corner, diagonal from where our bed was sitting, and I seen this figure. This time, it wasn't just a small shadow. This was a figure. The ceilings in the house, if I remember right, was like the 10-foot tall ceilings. They weren't the your standard 8-foot ceilings.
Right.
And this thing stood in the corner and had to be at least as a 7 or 8 year old kid. To me, it looked like it probably was about 6, at least 7 foot tall, 6.5, 7.5 foot tall. And I could see the head, I could see the shoulders, I could see its arms, the torso, but from like the waist area down was just solid. There was no shape. There was no legs.
Right.
And it was positioned in a way that it looked like, it looked like it was turned to where these other shadows would move, like it was watching them. And later I gave it the name the Overseer. And I've learned throughout the years that there's some of these things, they call them the Watchers. And I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but
yeah, I've seen stuff about Watchers. Yeah.
Well,
that's crazy.
It would watch these other shadows, the impression I got. And again, I tried to scream for my dad, and I couldn't, and I'd hide, and eventually fall asleep, or I'd look and it's gone. I remember this happening three distinct times. I remember happening, and on the third time, I started seeing the shadows. I look over, this thing's in the corner, and other people would tell me, "Oh, you was having sleep paralysis. That's why you couldn't scream. That's why you couldn't do this." I know I wasn't, because on this time, instead of covering my head up, I sat up and I scooted back into I guess that's how you say scooched, whatever you want to say, back into the corner of the bed where the head of the bed was in the wall. And and when I did that, this thing immediately went from looking in the direction where those shadows were moving, and it looked directly at me. And within like, to me, like a split second, it came across the room, underneath the top bunk, leaned down under, put its hands on the bed, and was in with 8 to 10 inches of my face. And there was no shape, there was no eyes, there was no features. I could just see this head. I could see the shoulders, the arms. And the weirdest thing about it, I mean, way weirder than that, is some people describe them as being darker and dark, blacker and black, or however you want to say it. This thing was extremely dark, but inside the shape wasn't solid, or it's hard to explain. It didn't look like just a solid blackness. It moved.
Right.
That material,
like a flowing stuff.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. It looked like black smoke rolling inside this shape.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, it was like forever it was there, but probably wasn't very long. It probably, I say, within 15, 20 seconds. I don't know. But it kind of leaned back, stood back up, turned to its left, and can't say walk, but it kind of looked like it glided, because there was no legs, out through the door that went into my mom and dad's bedroom, turned left, and which was in the direction of the living room, and it was gone. That was the last time I seen it. I mean, I can't remember how long after that we moved, but that's
I'm glad you moved.
Yeah. So I got into, instead of being completely terrified of the strange, the paranormal, stuff like that, I got fascinated by it, and I would talk to people. As a kid, I would listen to stories. I'd listen to family stories, or I'd listen to my grandma tell stories. Anybody had a weird story, I was there to listen to it, and I just found it just fascinating. Then I started started reading things. Did my parents believe me? My mom was, she experienced things throughout her, in a way or so, but she just did not give it any kind of, she's like, just, my dad, absolutely. Because years later, when there was Dave Schrader, he did a podcast. He had a radio station called Darkness Radio, and he was looking for stories, and I wrote that out and I sent it to him. And that was one of the first ones. That was the first one on that show he read. And I actually let my dad listen to it. And I looked at my dad and I was like, do you know where that was at? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. He said that was on Michael's Hill. So he probably experienced something there as well. But me and my dad, growing up, we talked a lot about the paranormal stuff and ghosts and other things. He was he was open to it, had experiences throughout his life at times. But Mom, she just just want to dismiss it. I think it was more, it freaks me out, I just don't want to talk about it. That's the way my brother. That's the way the brother I shared a bedroom with at the time. Later on we had another brother, but he's the same way. I just don't want to talk about it. So they both believed me, but my dad more so. We could actually share with or talk about it. But it led, like I said, it led into me talking to other folks. When I got to be a teenager and stuff, people were like, "Hey, you heard, if I'd hear something, I'd say, I'll tell me about it." So
Yeah.
people started to find out that I was into it, and I would talk to people, and eventually, my son, this is years down the road. My oldest son and his mom, his mom and I got a divorce, and he would come over every weekend, and he's like, "Hey, Dad," he said, well, I asked him, I said, "What would you like to do this weekend?" He's like, "I'd like to go ghost hunting." He's like 10 years old. We'd also talked about stuff, and he's heard some of the stories my dad would have to say. I'm like, "Well, that's cool." Yeah. So we went and we bought the little tape recorder. We bought those disposable cameras, stuff like that. And we went out in, graveyards or wherever, and kind of done a little ghost hunting thing. And then eventually it got to the point where he got older, and we decided, hey, let's start a group, So we had a couple people in the group besides he and I. And we investigated homes, we investigated businesses, we investigated, some local haunts that people, I guess you call them, like a haunted tunnel, stuff like that, graveyards, some of the bigger, venues, I guess you'd say. We went to those, and well, after some time, the life, I guess you say, gets in the way, and people just go their separate ways. And the two other folks the two other main members, eventually, moved on, and we had a couple other people would go with us on occasions, but there was just four main members, but it still left me and my son. And we would do things still together. We would go to a couple places, or we do what we call a hobby hunt. We go to a local, like the local haunts, I say, like the tunnel, or there's a church here called the Witch's Grave. We'd go there. And after some time, my son's, and we, through discussion, my son's like, "Hey, how do you feel about Bigfoot, the subject?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's cool. I know about the Patterson Gimlin film. I know, I've heard some stories. But I've never dug into it. When I was a kid, the only cryptid I really thought was cool was the Loch Ness Monster. Mainly because it's Odell, Scotland, and all that stuff. So I think that's why. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Well, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts." He said, "I'm getting into the subject." I'm like, "Okay." So he turned me on to a couple podcasts, and Sasquatch Chronicles was one, The Confessionals was another one. And so I started listening to all those, and I'm like, yeah, this is really cool. And again, through discussion, we were sitting around, and he's like, we both were, just BS. And I was like, and we looked at each other, and I can't remember. I think it was me that said it, and he's the one that finally came up with the name. I said, would it not be cool if there was a place where West Virginia people could come share their stories, whether it's Bigfoot, aliens, ghosts, UFOs. I didn't care. Anything strange, we'd listen to it. So he came up with the name West Virginia Cryptids and Strange. It wasn't Encounters at first. No, it wasn't Encounters at first. It was something else.
Oh, what?
And then we're like, no, that doesn't sound right. And then he said, what about Encounters? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that'll work. And it wasn't until probably almost 2 years later that it dawned on me, when I'm sitting there doing something on the page, that comes out to mean West Virginia case. And that's what a lot of people call it now, is West Virginia case. But so we started that page, and I think it was in October. I can't remember the year right now. I think we're going on it's almost 10 years now. But we started in October, and by March we had I think 200 or 300 people. I think it's close to 300 people. And I was like, wow, that's really cool, because I would put something on every day. I'd find something weird, something creepy, and I'd put it on there just, every day for people to see. 300 people. And I'm like, that is really cool. And I was like excited. And then I put a post about a ghost, like a hitchhiking ghost in Huntington, West Virginia. It's the typical lady in white, the whole hitchhiking. It's on 5th Street in Huntington.
I've been there. I went to Marshall.
So have you heard the story though?
I had heard the story, but the only women I ever picked up on, well, we better not talk about that. When I was at Marshall, but that's crazy.
So I put that on there, and I don't know, it caught hold. It caught traction, and people just started to share it, started to like it, started to comment, and it's still, I think, probably the highest. Has got the most activity of anything on the page, to be honest with you. And it even now it'll go through a cycle and people start doing it again.
That's
Well, anyway, so we went from like 300 people in March to somewhere in April, I think late April, early May, to like 3,000 to some people on the page. And people are like, "Oh, you worry about the numbers." No, I don't worry about that. I just fascinated that this many people were interested in a subject. I didn't care, how many likes, views, or anything. I just thought that was amazing that this many people in West Virginia and there was people from other states, other countries, they thought it was just as cool as I did. So I thought that was just awesome. So I then sometime after that, I put which I had done a couple cryptid creatures and stuff, but I put a story about a Bigfoot sighting, if I remember right. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but I put something on about a Bigfoot sighting, and people started to either email me or message me. Most time it was through Messenger, that they've had sightings and experiences in West Virginia, and I was getting them constantly. I mean, I would go to bed and I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have 15, 20 messages. And then my wife, she can attest to this. I'd sit here on a phone or Messenger for hours talking to people, and there's a lot of people that I've talked to that you'll never see on Facebook or you won't see in the book, because they just they didn't really want to share it. They just needed somebody to talk to. And what's, to me, that's kind of weird, not weird. It's weird for me because generally and my wife will tell you this too. I'm an introvert. I really don't like to be around a bunch of people, but for some reason it was just like they gravitated to me, want to tell me their stories. So that's basically, how I got into it. And then people started like, "Hey, would you like to come check out this area? Would you like to come to my property?" And
yeah.
After some time talking to a couple other people, say, "Hey, how safe do you think this really is?" And they're like, you'll have some strange people, but I've never really run into that. It's all, pretty much it's been genuine people, like, wanted me to talk to them and show me what they're experiencing. And also when they did that, I wasn't one to jump in and say, "Yep, this is Bigfoot, absolutely," because I was still learning, for one. Two, I think I kind of based this on my paranormal investigating background. I looked at stuff different. I was like, I try to debunk everything first before I jump in to say, yeah, this is what it is. And
I've noticed you've done that live when we were together.
Yeah. And there have been people that and they've been very understanding, accepting, because they're realizing I'm showing them something and they've understood. I hate to say teaching, because that just kind of feels, kind of arrogant, but I was teaching them, hey, this is what this is. Look into this first, pointing things out that, no, this couldn't have happened this way because of this. And they were extremely accepting of it, in several cases. For example, a friend of mine and myself went to a property. Well, let me do the other one first. I went to this one property where the lady said that there's been some activity. This tree stuff has been moved. I'm like, okay, I'll come down and check it out. And the one thing she showed me, she goes, this moved since last week. And I'm like, I'm like, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, she goes, why you say that? I was like, well, if you look at the way, because it was like a treetop, and she said that this treetop had been moved into it by like last week. I'm like, if you look at the tips, I said, I think you've just misunderstood, or not paid attention to it as much, or closely. If you look at the treetop, you could see where it was on the ground. I said, you got leaf litter from last year covering part of that. You also got greenbrier that's also grown into it. This has been here a while.
Mm.
And she was understanding. She goes, yeah, I guess I just haven't, I've gotten so caught up in the things we've been hearing that I just didn't notice it was there prior, I guess. So that was
Right.
one of them.
That's
The other
crazy.
one,
Well, before we tell some more Bigfoot stories, I got a couple things. And I hate to interrupt you because you can finish that in a second. But that Steve Hickey, who follows our channel all the time, comes in on lives, and he doesn't like to put stuff online, so he handed Tina this money, $25, and said, "Here's my Cash-App, $25." So thanks, Steve. That we'll use that in Vegas. So sorry to interrupt you on that, Les. Go ahead and finish that up. I'm sorry.
So a friend and I got invited to this property, and she said she had found some footprints. And by the time we got there, what she was calling footprints, were hard. It was hard to tell whether they were or not. They had a shape, but it looked like they'd been washed out. There was a gap between them. It looked like a trackway. But I told her, I was like, I can't definitively say that these are prints. And she goes, well, I really would like to have casted them when they were fresh, but I don't know how to do that. So right there, I'm like, hey, I got material in the truck or in my vehicle. We'll cast a couple of these. And I said, I'll show you how to do it. And if you've ever find anything else, you can cast them yourself. And we did. Casted them, we pulled them. There wasn't really any detail to them. And I left them there with her. And I got from a couple people, I got flack for that. And they're like, why would you leave them there? I'm like, because they're not mine. She found them.
Right.
I just took the opportunity to teach her how to do that in case, something ever comes up again. And they're like, yeah, but I'm like, no, you don't understand. They're not mine. That's not my property. She found, why would I take them? So that was another time I just,
unless she gave them to you, right?
Right.
So, and one of the, I'm going to go back to the shadow figures because there have been twice that I've seen like these shadow things, and one thing that when you were talking about they were really like short. Tina and I had gone to Bobby Mackey's, the old country western bar up in Wilder, Kentucky.
Yeah, they tore it down recently.
Yes, they just tore it down.
Yeah.
It's sad because we'd gone up there a lot. Well, we went on the ghost tour one time, and it's in the basement. It was so cold. It was like 13 degrees that night. But we went on in this thing, and I was joking. Oh, I feel a cold spot right here. But the whole place was cold. It was 13 degrees. But anyway, what was weird, and we sat in there in a circle, and I don't know, whatever, the hole was there where it's supposed to be what they call it, the portal to hell or whatever.
Right.
So Tina and I then, we didn't think anything about it. We came on home. And then after a few days of being home, I started noticing these little figures, maybe about a foot tall, maybe smaller than that. but they would just dart across the floor in our living room. And this would go on. It wouldn't be all the time, but every once in a while, I'd sit down on my couch and I'd be watching TV, and all of a sudden, I'd see something. Well, I was thinking, dang, I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind or something. And then Tina, this went on for about 2 weeks. And Tina and I were sitting on the couch watching something on TV, and I saw it again. And I said, Tina, did you see anything just go across the floor? And she goes, yes. And I said, what was it? She goes, it was just like this black shadow looking thing that went like it. And I'm like, yes, that's it. I said, I've been seeing them for about 2 weeks. And she goes, I have too. So, you know what we did? We prayed and prayed and prayed to get those things out of our house, and they did go away. But I thought that was great. And that, when you were telling your story, if I'd seen the washer thing that you saw, I'd have just sold the house and I'd been gone. But that was crazy. and Danny had a question. Danny's in here, your buddy Danny.
Mm-hmm.
He had a question for you. How long have you been investigating? And I think we're getting into that now. As you started doing your Bigfoot stuff.
Yeah, Bigfoot, getting into Bigfoot, probably, it's been probably 10 or 12 years now.
Wow.
As far as like the other stuff, I mean, if you consider me reading books, listening to people's stories and stuff like that, and, you know, I'm 51, so at least 40 years doing that. If you consider, you know, as a kid, listening to or reading books and listening to stories, and, you know, doing whatever I thought was the cool thing when I went somewhere, you know. So, but actively investigating, you know, probably, you know, like being really serious about it, I guess you'd say, or however you want to put that. At least 25 years. You know, 25 to 30 years. Yeah.
Wow. Now, for me, when I was a little kid, you know, I was born in 1960, and the Patterson-Gimlin film was 1967. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when they started making that public, but I remember watching it on TV. It might have been 68, 69, whatever, something around there. And I was just mesmerized at that at a young age. But then, like you mentioned earlier, then you go on with your life. And
right.
You know, I coached basketball. I wasn't interested in much anything. And I watched the Ghost Adventures and stuff like that. And it wasn't until about 2019 that I really, well, let me back it up. About 2013 is when I had the tree knocks in this place, which I would love for you to come up and us go investigate this place. Because every time I go, it's just a creepy, and it's heavily trafficked. There's a lot of hikers there. But if you go in the evening or during the week, sometimes there's nobody there. But that's what kind of like got me really interested in Bigfoot when I got to capture those tree knocks, and then my interest grew. So, and then that's how I found you, because Bigfoot. And guys, is your book on Amazon?
It's on Amazon, and books in Barnes and Noble. It's on both of them. Yeah. So
go check out. This is a really good compilation of stories. Awesome. So let me just ask you something. I've picked out a few stories, but what to you are your one or two favorite stories?
Probably the Margaret mystery, or the Margaret monster beast, or whatever you want to call it. I've called it more than, you know, all of those. because it reminds me, gives me that feeling of like, like the missing 411 type stories. But it didn't end up in that. But, to me, if something like those stories are happening, this could have been the end result of this. If things didn't play out the way it did, could have probably been that way. What happened is this gentleman had just come back from Vietnam, and the family, his dad had already passed away years earlier. I think said he was like 12 or 13 when his dad passed away. So they had this farm. His mom, his sister, I can't remember if she was the oldest child or not, but she was his older sister. And she had several kids, went through a divorce. She had several kids. I can't remember exactly how many, but she had a few. And she had moved back home and living with her mother and taking care of the farm and whatnot. And well, he just got back from Vietnam and come to the farm. And what they did, he said that once a month they would go to the town. This is several years ago, so there wasn't a Walmart just down the road or anything like that. They would go to a local town, which was probably about, let me think, it's probably at least 10 or 12 miles away, if I'm not mistaken. And his mom and his sister would go, and they'd buy food for the month. Well, they asked, hey, can you watch your nieces and nephews? And he agreed. And they're in the house, and for some reason, I don't remember exactly why, but they noticed the water had went off in the house. There was no water. So he thought, something must be wrong with the pump in the well. Well, the pump for the well was in like a cellar. It was off the farmhouse, kind of was like in a small L shape, and off in the one corner was a cellar, and then across from that there was like a breezeway, or beside that there was a breezeway, and then there was a smoke shed, or whatever you want to call it, root cellar or whatnot. But he knew that possibly the pump had quit working. So he told his nephew, he said, I got to stay here. He said, I got to watch your brothers and sisters. He said, can you go see why the pump has quit working? And his nephew was like, I'm scared. I don't want to go. I don't want to go down there by myself. He's like, you'll be fine, man. He said, I'll stand here at the back door. He said, I'll watch you. He said, you'll be fine. So he's standing at the back door. His nephew goes across the yard, or whatever you want to call it there, the little courtyard thing, I guess you'd call it maybe, and starts to go down. As he turns to go down the stairs toward the cellar, this arm comes around the corner of the house about 6 feet off the ground, a big hand, long, like reddish brown hair hanging from its bottom of his arm, and like it was going to grab his nephew by the top of the head. He screams at his nephew, watch out. His nephew looks and sees what's going on, kind of does like a little roll, because there was the wall was there, stairs. He kind of rolls on the ground and then stands up, takes off running, and back to the house. Well, in the book, I didn't put this part because I don't know why. Maybe because I just didn't want to make it seem, I guess you say, because people are like, oh, it would be turned. I don't care anymore, because there's like, it was a woo part to it or whatever. I don't care. I don't care. I'll listen to everything anybody talks. But he immediately, right there in the way he told me, is there was a shotgun standing in the corner of the kitchen. He immediately grabs that shotgun, runs across, gets to the corner of the house, and there's a field. I don't remember how long, but there's a field, and crossways, it was probably about 75 to 100 yards across, and then it got into the woods. By the time he grabbed that gun and ran across that courtyard, this thing was gone. He couldn't see anything. He didn't see it going through the woods. He couldn't see it on either side, left or right. So to this day, I don't know what happened or where it went or whatever, or neither did he. But I asked him, I was like, did you know what it was? He said, I had no idea. He said, but it wasn't until years later throughout the years, he's seen like the Bigfoot or the Patterson Gimlin film, learned about that and heard other stories about Bigfoot. And he said to him, by what he was seeing on TV and hearing, that's the only thing it could have been. Whether it was just that fast or whatever, and he just lost sight of it, very possible. But it was just, it's just weird because you hear those other stories where they seem to just like disappear, like gone. So I kind of left that out for that reason, because I didn't want people like, and it's just kind of BS story. But no, that's the full story, So
right. Well, don't you find Bigfoot seems to be, based on all the stories that I've read about, they're interested in kids.
There are a lot of accounts and a lot of reports where they seem to frequent, like there's some at schoolyards, are appearing in windows. It seems to be children and women as well.
Yeah, I was going to say women as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a curiosity thing. I guess it would be, but you also hear the old Native American lore where they said that these things would steal the kids and their squaws and take off with them. Yeah, I don't know, but there is a lot of stories where they talk about they were seem curious.
Just like when I did the video about the Rock of Judicula, he basically the legend is he took a Cherokee lady, made him his wife.
Right.
And I mean, that's just a legend, but that goes from way, way back. So that is an interesting story. And just crazy story. I mean, there was on one of David Pleitus's videos up in, I think it was Alaska, maybe, or maybe Washington, where the Bigfoot reached through and tried to get the kid that was in the outhouse. You remember that story?
I remember hearing about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounded very similar to this, but he's reaching through the window in the house, right? In your story. So that's just crazy.
I was reaching around the house, like the corner, and it was like the arm come around.
Yeah.
As the kid started to go down the stairs, the stairs were on the outside of the house, and the arm came around.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that could have been a missing 411.
Absolutely.
Right there. So, any other of your favorites, and then I'm going to pick out a couple from your book that I thought were pretty interesting.
I'm just reading that one comment there. One of my other favorites ones.
Oh, what is your? Okay, that's a good question.
What is your speculation on why there are sightings at many different locations all over the U.S.? Well, that's kind of a weird question, or not a weird question. There's kind of a weird answer, I guess you'd say, because I could see these sightings being in areas where they could, where something like this could live. But there's also sightings in areas where you wouldn't think the habitat would hold or support, or there's just not enough. Why would some of these things be in towns? And then you have some, it's just weird. I mean, I haven't quite got to the point where I can say they're one thing or another. I mean, some people believe that there's some kind of paranormal aspects to them, or something. Which, if you look into that term, you can describe some of the stuff as paranormal, because it just means not studied or not able to be explained by science. Right. But when you have stories that have qualities to them that sound like animals, then it's an animal. I think it's an animal for sure. But then you have stories that are just strange, that have weird aspects to them. And I'm one that will listen to them. I'll listen to all of them. Listen to it doesn't matter. So when all these sightings are going on, sometimes I'm just wondering, are people experiencing different things? And some of these sightings are strange, and they have some paranormal aspects to them. And because people say they're Bigfoot is because, but then again, you got the history of it. But people say they're Bigfoot. Well, maybe that's because it's just become so ingrained in our culture and other cultures now that's the first thing we can relate to it. That our brain just tries to make sense of something. So maybe some of this stuff that people are experiencing is just that. It's just some weird, crazy stuff. So that's why I think that some sightings or experiences people are having, in these areas or in those areas, because that they're either misidentifying something or, they're just trying to make sense of it. And Bigfoot's just something, an easy scapegoat to that.
Kind of like otherwise, also like people say everything's a bear.
Right. It's a bear. It's a bear. Yeah. But there are places I to me, if you look into those areas, there's no way that something like this could live. There's just not enough. There's not enough food source. There's not enough cover. There's not enough. But why are people seeing this? And I can't come up with an explanation other than there's got to be something strange about them. Some people are, oh yeah, they're just moving through. Well, I don't know.
Let me give you a prime example of that. So, like Arizona has had numerous Bigfoot sightings. And there are places in Arizona like you just wouldn't see it, but then there's other places that is a little bit forested. And one of the places I went was Stanton, Arizona, which there's some shrub brush, but if something's 6 or 8 feet tall, there's no way they're going to hide. It's just makes sense. So I was going down to do a video about the ghost town in Stanton, Arizona. And it's an old mining town. And I got out just to take some B-roll for my video. And I'm walking through trying to get the mountains and everything. And I look down and there's a Bigfoot footprint. Clear as day. I mean, but I said, well, I got to take a picture of that. Then I started taking more pictures. I come back and then I couldn't find the footprint. That was weird too, because like I wasn't that far away from it. And then it was gone. But anyway, like Arizona, that's what you're saying right there. It's like you would think there's any way they're going to live off of cactus and whatever.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, they're just weird stories, or weird encounters, I guess you say. And to me, I think some of those are just completely different. They're not related. And to me, for some of these, I mean, investigators, researchers, whatever people want to call themselves, I don't like to call myself a researcher, because I'm not out there researching something all the time, or have something to set and research, or set in an area and research, an animal. Or so I consider myself like a investigator, a collector, I guess you say, of stories and experiences, and investigate those experiences. But
I
also feel, I also feel, well, yeah, I guess you say, but I mean, I also feel that when you have these investigators, researchers that are staunch one way or the other, it has to be this. This is what it is. I know this. Well, no, you don't know it. If you did know what's going, if you did know and you knew everything about it, you could take us right to it. You know its patterns, you know everything. And other ones like, yeah, it's paranormal, but it can't be this. Maybe it is, maybe it ain't. But I will listen to all of it because eventually maybe I can put it together like, yeah, this is what this is, and this is what this over here is. You know, they got some similarities, but there's something completely different. And I think for those who are into this subject and don't look at it that way or do it that way, are doing an injustice to the field because you're not collecting data the way you should to, you know, like I tell some folks, the best way to prove what you're looking for is disprove other things first, basically. You know, basically just debunk it until you get to that point where you're like, this is what it is. So I will listen to it all. You know, and not only you're doing an injustice to you as a researcher, investigator, but when you're talking to these witnesses and experiencers, if you're just like, I don't want to hear it because, you know, it's weird, you're doing an injustice to those folks because they may have had a life-changing experience that they know what they experience and they need somebody to talk to. You just dismiss them. And in a lot of the instances when that happens, that person will never talk to anybody again. They just, you know, like, hey, I'm going to be called a nut. I'm going to talk. So
that's right.
So that's the way I try to approach, you know, the subject, and I guess, or the investigating part of it, I guess you'd say.
Well, you got a couple questions here, but you know, when I saw the Bigfoot that I saw in California, and I was living out in Kingman, Arizona, I had some friends in Las Vegas, and there was a couple of people, YouTubers, that like that. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, you've seen ghosts and you've seen Bigfoot. Yeah, right. It's like, yeah. And you know, what do you? I mean, there is no other explanation because somebody that's seen something like you're saying, they know what they saw.
Yeah.
And it may not have been exactly what they saw, but they know they saw something.
Yeah.
You know, very, very seriously. But anyway, there's two questions. Danny was wanting to know your favorite place to ghost hunt or cryptid hunt, and Tina was wanting to know your scariest. So try all that. It might be the same.
No, not really. Danny, I believe it or not, I like to, you know, I've done a lot of residential, you know, as far as ghost hunting, if that's what, you know, I enjoy that. I enjoy the littler known locations or whatever you want to say. Because I think a lot of times in the bigger locations, the hype is so whatever, you know, it's just, that's what it is, just hype. And I'd rather go into an area or a location where, you know, there may be some activity and I can just go in and experience it for myself and not worry about what other people have said, you know, through years and years and years of these places being paid for. And so, but one of my favorite places is a local area. It would be the witch's grave is what they call it. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, I guess you know, I don't want to say unfortunately, but through investigating this stuff and research, you know, you find out that the lady they call the witch, Cherilda Jane Wetzel, was not a witch at all. And the things that happen at this church and the things that I've experienced at the church have nothing to do with a woman. It's always been something like a male entity or something like that. But that's probably one of my favorite. I've been there dozens of times, and I enjoy it.
I think your last video there, that was interesting place and good story.
Yeah, it's like built in 1894 or 96. Sits on the top of a mountain all by itself. Pretty awesome place. There's been a lot of strange stuff happened there.
Yeah.
I've seen a full apparition, shadow figure, I guess, or whatever you want to say, in the graveyard. I actually believe I had something follow me home from there once.
That's what
Actually
scares me. Fall stuff coming home with you. That's scary.
we were actually inside the church, and I've actually seen stuff move in this church. I'll start with that. You go into church, you had, all the pews and stuff, but you had these chairs that sitting on one side, and it sounded like someone had come through up the aisle and went up and sat down on one of these wicker bottom chairs. The old wooden chairs had the wicker, back and bottom.
Right.
And it sounded like somebody sat down in one of them. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I stood up, had a thermometer, and I'm walking over there, and I got the thermometer pointing at the chair, and the person that had the camera was like looking around instead of following me. And all of a sudden, that chair just went spun like 90 degrees, just like,
Oh my God.
And I'm like, did you see that? And did you catch that? And he's like, no, man, I was listening, whatever. And I look back, and because he was looking back down toward the back of the church, he said, I thought I was hearing something. Well, right after that, the door opens on the church. So we was there for a little bit longer. We eventually go home, and me and my son went, like I said, I was divorced. My son and I went to my apartment, and it was like early morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember exactly when, but it was wee early in the morning. And you walked in my apartment door, you had a little mud room. My bedroom was off that mud room. The living room was to the right, and my reclining chair sat right there on the other side of the door in the corner. I'd go in, and I sat down in the reclining chair, lean back. My son's in taking a shower. I'm waiting to get into the shower, and I hear the doorknob on the front of the apartment. I hear it jiggle and rattle, and then the door opens. I jump up thinking somebody's there. I go to the door. There's nobody there. The wind's not blowing, and I'm like, all right, that's odd. Maybe I didn't get it shut all the way. So I shut the door back, and I tug on it, and I make sure it's latched. I didn't lock it. Don't ask me why I didn't lock it, but I tugged on it, and I go back and I sit down in the chair again, and within 10, 15 seconds I was sitting down, I hear it jiggle, and the door opens up again. So I go out and I stand up, and I'm like, hey, you can't be here. You're not welcome here. I don't know where you come from, but you need to go. You need to leave. You don't have permission to be here. And I shut the door again, and it never happened again. So I think something just came home with us from the church, with the door opening to the church, and then, happening twice at the house. So
wow.
That's one of my favorite places to go.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let me tell you this one. Are you finished?
Oh, Tina said she wanted about the scariest one, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, let me tell you my scariest one with a ghost, and we're supposed to be talking about Bigfoot, but we've talked about ghosts more. But anyway, I know people are into that too. I think this. I went down to Tombstone, Arizona. Have I told you this story? When I was,
I know you're supposed to go, yeah.
And I went to stayed at this place called the San Jose Hotel, and I booked the room there because it was just a block off Tombstone Main Drag. Tombstone's like 5 blocks now. It used to be 16 blocks long back when Wyatt Earp was there, and there were brothels and bars and all that kind of stuff. Well, so I checked in the San Jose Hotel, and I noticed when I was walking over to the Strip that it was the oldest lodge in Tombstone. And the name of my room was the Doc Holliday room. Of course, I just thought, well, that's, it's like Disney. You have the Mickey Mouse room, you're in Tombstone, you got the Doc Holliday room. So I didn't think anything about it. So I go on, spend through the night, and we actually went to that theater. I think it's called the Birdcage in Tombstone or something. Did a tour there. There was some stuff that had these things on the tables that was lighting up and stuff, like showing presents and stuff while we were in there. Didn't think anything about it. Come home. I go to bed, and I'm asleep, and all of a sudden I hear this big, just like that. And I sat up. I'm like, what the heck? Somebody like pounded on the wall, because I was on the last room, and it sounded like somebody just pounded on the wall, or maybe in the bathroom or something like that. And I'm like, what the heck was that? And then I didn't hear anything, so I laid back down, going back to sleep. And then all of a sudden I hear boot steps or steps in the room. This is like, I had a bedroom, but there was a little, it's kind of like an apartment. It had like a kitchen, living room area. Then you go through the door and there's a bedroom. So I hear this, but also hear at the same time as you hear a boot, like you'd hear, then you'd hear like a scrape. Man, I jumped up, turned, and when I turned to look at the door, because I'm laying on my left side, and I turn and look at the door because I'm thinking somebody's walking right into my room. And I turn over and I see this shadow figure. You could even see it had like a cowboy hat, a flat cowboy hat, and it just went right out the door. So, man, I didn't know what was going on. I got my camera up and tried to take pictures, see if there's an orb or something. It didn't show anything. So then I was like, man, this is just too crazy. And I laid back down. I'm trying to go to sleep, and then I hear like that, but coins, something like that. And I'm like, what the heck is this place? So I just reached over and Googled San Jose Hotel, Tombstone, Arizona, ghost stories. Pops up. They had a picture of somebody that actually took a picture of what they thought was Doc Holliday and a woman. But Doc Holliday didn't die there. So I can't say that was Doc Holliday. It's hard to tell who was in there. But it was like somebody was in there just checking me out. And that's probably the most scared that I've ever been. And so now we're going to hear your scariest one.
Well, I mean, it has to be a paranormal story because so far I haven't experienced anything Bigfoot related that I've been afraid of. I haven't had any like sightings. I haven't had any bluff charges like you people would. And I've heard a howl noise a couple times, things like that. But I haven't had an experience where I've been frightened. So if that's what you're looking for, Tina, I don't really have one. But as far as like being, I don't know if I would even say I was scared. I mean, I got freaked out. I mean, it creeped out. It would have to be a house that I investigated in Shinston, West Virginia. I got called. This lady said they were experiencing stuff in the house, hearing things. Her kids were being kind of, I don't know if you want to say tormented, but kind of messed with in a way. And they were experiencing things too, as well. And I went and talked to her, interviewed her, which is basically what I did at first. Would interview her, make sure, or ask what kind of activity, make sure everything else in the house was fine, that there weren't other issues with the family, things like that. It kind of, when you investigate things like that, sometimes you dig into some personal stuff sometimes in order to get down to things. Well, she told me some things that were going on, and she asked me if I would come back, and I'm like, yeah. And she she was only comfortable with me coming. So I went to her house. We walked around. I had a recorder and stuff. I had a camera, and, just the basic things. And she's telling me, we went upstairs, and she's telling me the activity that was going on upstairs. And we're going from room to room. Well, we're standing on this, there's like a landing hallway, whatever you want to call it, at the top of the stairs. Her son's room was over on the one end. Her room was on this side. And she's standing in the corner right there between those two rooms. I'm standing near the top of the steps. And I think I hear somebody coming up the steps. Well, there's nobody else in the house. There's not supposed to be anybody coming. Her kids were at her parents. So I immediately look down the stairs, and I don't see anything. I don't see anybody. When I turn back to her, there was somebody standing directly in front of her. Oh. There was another person.
Did she see it?
No. And wow. She was looking off to her. It would be her left. She's looking down off to her left, and this person. I mean, I could still see her, but I could tell there was somebody there in front of her. And I'm like, and I jumped back. I'm like, oh. And I grabbed the camera real quick, and next thing you know, nothing's there. When I tell you to take a picture, and I showed a picture. And she's like, what's wrong? I was like, there was just somebody standing in front of you.
That gave me chills.
And she goes, really? What, who, describe, who this person, what they look like or whatever. So I started describing this person. It was a man. And you could look at her and she's like, just turns white. You could tell this affected her. And she goes, I need to show you something. So we go downstairs, and she goes over to her desk and she pulls out these pictures. And she said, before you got here, which was a couple days before, she goes, I took all the pictures down in the house that were my husband. And I'm like, okay. And she shows me, and I described this gentleman, and it was him.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm like, okay. So she went on, she goes, and we talked a little bit, and she goes, I want to tell you the rest of the story. And I'm like, what do you mean the rest of the story? I knew her husband had passed away. And she go, and let me back up. We eventually, not eventually, I don't like you want to say that. But when I went through the recordings and stuff, I've caught several EVPs. And it was crazy EVPs. And I listened to them and told her about them. And then she goes, well, I need to tell you the rest of the story. And because she had listened to the EVPs, and I could tell, there's a couple of them that took her by surprise. One of them clearly it was from her bedroom, clearly says, Ready Freddy. Well, that broke her down because they called her husband Ricky, but his actual name was Frederick. And every time, she said all the time, I was like, when we're going somewhere, you ready, Freddy? You ready, Freddy? And then the other one was from her son's bedroom. It was a nasty sounded gurgly voice that said, why did you do this to me? And then the other one says, fine. And to me at first it said, find keys, or something like that. And I'm like, that didn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So I let her listen to them. And then I'm like, listen to that one again. And I was like, does that sound like find teeth? After I listened to it with her, she said, yes. And you could tell that affected her.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And that's when she goes, I need to tell you the rest of the story. Well, they'd lived in another home, and he started acting strange, or is the way she described it. And he seemed to be having some mental, I guess, issues. So they took him, he went to the doctor. They diagnosed him with schizophrenia, I guess, and bipolar, I think it was, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So they put him on medication. And one of the things that he would do, though, before they got him on medication, is he would go downstairs in this house, and he would go under like there's a little alcove under these stairs, and she would hear him talking to somebody downstairs. So they thought, well, it's schizophrenia. So they take him to the doctor, put him on medication. Things are okay for a while. She started noticing that he was acting a little different again. And then she started noticing he was going to the basement, and she could hear him talking again. Well, then there was one day he come through, seemed to be all right, said, hey, something about, hey, honey, or whatever. They both said something to each other. He goes downstairs. She's sitting in the living room. She could hear him talking. And then all of a sudden she hears this loud crack, and then stuff flies in the living room. And what he had done is he went to the downstairs, and he took a 30-06 and he put it underneath his chin. And it went through his, through the floorboards into the living room.
Oh my gosh.
After she called the authorities and whatnot, she was left the worst thing I can ever think, she was left to clean up the mess.
Wow.
And she had found 2 of his teeth in the living room.
Oh my gosh.
So that's where I think the fine teeth kind of came from. It was from that. Then they moved, and they started having things going on there. Like I said, caught several EVPs and stuff. She eventually got into another relationship. That gentleman ended up dying through overdose, I think it was. And then again later, she got into another relationship. That gentleman ended up passing away from a freak accident. So I don't know if to me there was some kind of dark presence that was attached to her or something, and it continued to be with her. And then I was listening to those EVPs again because she had called me and wanted me to make a disc to send her those EVPs.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm listening to those EVPs to go to make this disc, my computer literally catches on fire. The plug burns up in the back of the computer and everything else, and I lost everything. It just burned it up. Literally sparks, fire, everything come out of the back of the computer. I took it to a guy that I thought might be able to take the hard drive out and pull. He said I can't get anything off of it. So everything from that case was on there, and I lost every bit of it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stick to Bigfoot last, I think. Although I've done some crazy stuff, but wow, that's getting too close to stuff that I don't want to be close to, you know.
Right.
And that's just crazy. But so we got a few minutes. I don't know how much time you have, but
well, you want me to tell my other favorite Bigfoot story real quick before you?
Yes. Let's hear that one.
Okay. Well, it was in Nicholas County, 2018. This gentleman and his wife, and I didn't actually get to talk to him until probably a year or so later. But anyway, he calls me. He gets a hold of me. He told me, he's like, hey, he said, I'm 63 years old. He said, I don't believe. He said, no, sorry. He said, I'm 63 years old. I've lived in West Virginia all my life. He said, I've hunted in West Virginia all my life. He said, I'm basically like a mountain man. He said, I know the woods. I know the animals. I know it all. He said, you couldn't tell me Bigfoot existed in the world, let alone in West Virginia. He said, but now after that date, which was like November 2018, he said, you can't tell me it doesn't. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested. Tell me. And he started describing what happened. They were driving along Route 39 outside of a little town called Drennan, which is just like a little suburb, whatever you want, not even suburb, just a little community outside of outside of Summersville, West Virginia, Nicholas County.
Yeah.
And they round this turn. It's a long swoopy thing. It's in
County Yahoo.
Yeah, it's in the book. There's pictures in there in the book. The whole thing's not in the book, because I just put the report in there. But they round the turn. They see, and there's a big gravel spot down on the right-hand side. And they see this thing coming out on all fours toward the road. And they're thinking, oh, it's a bear. So he slows down so he doesn't hit the bear. Gets a little closer. Well, this thing comes out in the middle of their lane and stands on 2 feet and faces them. And that's when he realizes this isn't a bear. This is something else. And I asked them both to describe it, and they did. Shiny black color, dark. They believe it was black. It was shiny because they thought it was wet, which there was a creek right off the side. The chest was more bare than than the rest of it. It didn't have as much hair. But they kept saying every time because I would ask him different times, through the discussions and through the interview, to describe, because sometimes I'll ask trigger questions, I guess you'd say, like, hey, what was the weather like that day? Was it sunny? And sometimes that'll actually trigger their memory of something else. Oh yeah, it was sunny. I remember the hair was shiny or something like that. It kind of helps people. And so I'm asking them, and also I'm trying to get them to see if they're telling me a story, BS me. Well, their story never changed. But the thing they kept telling me that was really interesting to me is they said, we don't remember seeing the feet. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, the most odd thing out of that whole story. Why? What do you mean you don't remember seeing the feet?
Mm-hmm.
And so I agreed to go meet him. My son and I went, and we went down. And when there's 2 or more witnesses, I prefer to interview them separately. I don't like the witnesses feeding off each other. I want to hear the perspective of that person. Because even if they were in the same car, they're still seeing something different. Their angles are different. They're going to see something different. So I don't want one feeding off the other. I'd rather hear each one and see what details are similar and what might be different. So they did. And I asked the lady, because she did not want to walk around the area. She goes, I don't want to walk. She goes, after seeing that, I'm going to sit in the car. And I was like, could you do me a favor? And I said, could you? And I carry paper and a pencil and stuff like that and a clipboard. I said, could you sketch what you saw? And she said, yeah, I can do that. And I also carry these 4x4 pictures. Well, here, I'll show you one of them right here. They look like this right here.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Is this?
That's the one. That's
your sketch, right?
Yep. And I have people to pick either a picture if they've seen the face or different features from them, so I can kind of get a picture of what they might look like, kind of like a police lineup. Or I use it as what I call BS tail. If I lay these pictures out, like showing you, and you're like, oh yeah, real nonchalant, like kind of, that was that one, you're most likely telling me a story. You're kind of fibbing, in my opinion. Right. But when you have a trigger, when they wince, or you see them reliving this experience in their face from seeing that picture, I'm going to listen more intently. And this guy had that trigger. I could tell. So it's hard to see in the book online there, but if you look at the picture and her drawing, if you look at the face, and they were completely separate when they did this, they look really, really similar. So, and then I looked at the picture she drew, and I'm like, you can't, why did she stop? She stopped, but like where maybe the knees were or below, and didn't draw anything else. It stopped at the bottom of the page, no feet, nothing. So we're standing there, we're chatting a little bit more. And then I'm like, it just like dawns on me. And I looked at the fellow. I said, can you take, and I said, we're in this lot. I said, we can't do it in the road, obviously. I said, can you take my son and tell him to stand where this thing was at in the road? And he did. And I was like, can you take, and because I'll back my car up, I was like, you stop me where you believe you were. And he did. And I immediately took my phone, and the pictures are in the book. You know, you can see them in the book as well. I don't know if you can see them on camera. I immediately took the picture, or my phone, eye level, took a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I take it and I hold it up, or I take it out to I take it out to him and I hand him the phone, and I was like, you know, look at this picture. And you could see his face just like flush, man. I mean, he's just like, I thought he was going to pass out. Yeah. And I said, what do you notice? And he goes, you can't see his feet. Yeah, if you look at the picture on the bottom there, yeah. And even though he knew he had seen something, that at that point, it was solidified. He knew how close he was now, and it was within 8 feet of his windshield. And to me, that's one of my favorite ones, is because if a man at that age grew up in that area and hunted all that life, he knows what a bear is, and he's not going to mistake what he's seen for a bear, even though he's been told time and time again it's a bear. And if you look at the actual report paper, it says it was not a bear. It was not a bear. He made sure he told me it was not a bear. But
exactly,
I just thought that was just an awesome report, or awesome encounter, I guess you'd say, and it's just one of my favorites.
It really is. And you know, it as somewhat like when I saw the Bigfoot in California, your mind, when I saw this thing, your mind wants to put it in a category.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mind was that a bear? I'm like, no, that's not a bear. It's like you're almost arguing with yourself because there was nobody else there. I'm like, no, I would have seen the whole bear. Like, from where my vantage point was, you'd have seen the whole back and everything. But what I saw were these big, long legs. And it's also interesting, like you mentioned, he's a hunter. You know, hunters are usually the ones that are hard to convince that Bigfoot's really out there.
Yeah.
Because they've been in the woods and they've never seen anything. So I wonder, and that's what one of the stories in here was about, that hunter that eventually saw one in Greenbrier. He's at Sherwood. But why do you think, I guess hunters, they're in the wood all the time, in the woods, but they don't have any experience, so they just disregard it. And they always will say, oh, the woods make noises. And but there's a difference between a tree knock and a tree maybe falling, or a bird making a noise. You know, when you hear something like that, you know it's not something normally in the woods. Just like the guy in this Sherwood story that was in your book, where he first hears those knocks.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, I never believed in Bigfoot at all. So that's one of my favorites in this book. Guys, we can't tell you all the stories. You have to buy the book. You have to go to Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You want to tell me about that story if you remember it?
I'm gonna look.
It's on page 45.
45, yeah.
Yeah, sighting in Greenbrier. And this guy was something else, because he stayed there 2 or 3 nights. This thing, evidently he heard knocks, but he kept going. Then
I remember. This is the part. That was the part I remember. I was about to ask you. Is that the one where the rock was thrown? The camper, something was in the camper. Yes.
Yeah. Tell us this story as much as you can remember, because this is a really interesting story, and I like it because it was a hunter.
Oh, I'm trying to. I mean, I remember those parts of it.
Then he saw it. Remember, he saw it. You know, he didn't even want to get out of his camper when the thing threw the rock because he was pretty scared. He got his gun and his rifle next to him. And then the next day, I think he ends up seeing him.
Yeah, he hears it making noise, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really good story.
I'm sorry if I don't remember all. I mean, because I've talked to so many people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He said I decided I was going to go out and see what had hit the camper. I went out and got up in back of my truck so I could see the top of the camper, thinking still a limb had fallen on top of the camper. He said there was nothing there. I began walking around the camper, and on the backside there was a pretty sizable dent in the camper. And he said on the ground next to the camper was a rock bigger than a softball, but not as big as a football, that thing had thrown at it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
see, I couldn't remember if that was the one where that happened. There's another one that I don't remember if it's in the book or not, where a guy was actually at his camp, and he had the rocks thrown, and they were coming through the trees and landing. But I don't remember if that one's in here. So that's why.
And then he convinced himself to stay there after that. And on page 47, he says, I started to walk. He saw this thing that looked like a stump. He said, I started to walk down the ridge back to the trail when movement across the hollow on the ridge where the big stump was caught my eye. I was amazed and dumbfounded at what I was seeing. The stump was gone, and the movement was something walking on two legs with very wide shoulders and long arms.
Reddish brown with long hair. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's a crazy story. And you know what? People don't realize that these things will just stand as still, or they'll crouch down and you don't move. They don't move.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, there's been a couple other stories or reports I've taken that they've done that. The one was recently, it was a couple years ago. I know you just want to tell me talk about the ones you were in here, but
no, keep going. Yeah, that's good.
I was actually driving for work. I was heading toward Elkins, and I just topped this knoll, and you can look down and you can see the Tigard River, and there's these huge rocks along in the river, and I see something briefly, saying something standing on one of these rocks. Hunters don't want to be something besides big, so you can keep going in the woods. Basically, well, there's been a lot of people that have experiences and never went back in the woods. So
yes, true.
But I seen something stand on this rock, and I come back, and I was thinking, well, what did I see? Did I see a fisherman? Did I see a log or something standing up behind this rock, or was there one of these things there? And to this day, I don't really know. I just know when I went back, whatever was there is not there. Is not there anymore. So
that's strange.
I went back a couple times to walk the area and look, see if I can find any evidence of anything. And one of the times that I went, I put on Facebook, hey, I'm going to be in the Elkins area. If anybody's ever had any experiences in this area, I'd like to talk to them. Well, I'm actually walking along the river, and this lady from the area messages me. She goes, my son had an experience, last year during hunting season last year, which was the previous year, right before, because I was there, in when I had was probably, I think it was June or July. I can't remember right offhand. It was June or July, just about the same time this year as it, right now. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to talk to him. So she messaged him my phone number. He calls me, and we're talking as I'm looking around. And he's telling me about his experience, about his sighting. And what he told me is like, he's telling me where the road is. He's telling me where they had a leased property, and he's telling me, about the windmill and stuff like that. And he's like, I had a tree stand below this one windmill. And he said the windmill wasn't moving or anything like that. He said, but I'm sitting in my tree stand. He said, I start hearing jabbering, I guess, chattering, like a jabbering sound, like like a chattering noise, like something like chattering, talking. Yeah. He said, I just couldn't figure it out. He said, I could hear something moving around. He said, then I started hearing this clacking noise. He said, immediately I knew what that was. He said, I knew that was a bear. He said, I knew this bear was clacking its jaws. He said, this bear walks out in the right of way, a little ways down, just a short distance from his tree stand, and it stops and looks around and then moves on pretty quickly. He's like, oh, bear's here. Something spooked it. It's probably me, caught wind of me. I'm just going to move on, go to walk to where my dad's stand. He said, whatever, I'm not going to get anything. Everything's done spooked now. So he's walking the right of way. And I think he told me it was like 75 yards away or so. He said, that's the oddest looking tree stump along this right of way. Then he realizes, wait a minute, that's not right. It doesn't look right. And he moves a little bit, and this thing turns and looks at him. And it's not very big. It's not very big. He said it's only about 4 foot tall. It's about 2 feet wide. He said it's got darker brown hair, and the chest of it, the hair's lighter, and it kind of goes down almost in like a V pattern toward the groin area. And he immediately is like, oh, he realized what it is. And he goes to try to get his phone. He said this thing takes off. But yeah, at first it was standing there like he thought it was a stump, it just standing there and right. So I started asking more questions about where it happened and stuff. And we pinpointed, he sent me a pin drop, and it was literally like less than 3 miles from where I was at, where I possibly had a sighting. I don't know for sure. So that was kind of cool, to get something that quick, within November to June. So that's 8 months, 9 months. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah.
That is cool. Let me share my screen real quick so I can show you a couple. First of all, let's go on Facebook, and you have the West Virginia Cryptids and Strange Encounters. Mm-hmm. And so you guys can go there. You can see he's got 21,000 followers to go there. You can report your stories or whatever. And
I don't mean to interrupt you on that. Try to send them to me personally, or go to West Virginia Case 304 at yahoo.com, because what's it been, a year or more? Facebook did something. I don't know what it was they did, but they made my page basically like a business page. It's like weird. I have to go to a whole nother app. It's called a Business Suite app in order to see the messages now. And a lot of times I don't get to see them, because they don't give me a notification. So so if you want to send me a story or, whatever, just hit me up on my personal page, or like I said, WV Case 304 at yahoo.com.
And let me share the other. Is all this info on your cryptids page on YouTube? like where to reach you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know. I need to check that email. Make sure that's the update email.
So you'd have to go to. I know that's his address, but view email address. Is that right?
How about what's it say? I can't see it on there.
YouTube.com or
no, I'm gonna have to change that. I'm gonna
it
have
just
to put
says YouTube.com/.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I don't
that's
get
your
no
channel.
Yeah. But yeah.
I need to check. I'm not a robot on that. But anyway, there's his channel, and then I got to do some business here, pay the bills. So I'm going to share one more thing with you. And guys, if you're interested in Les, I've got a t-shirt I'm going to give you. And if you want, you can go buy Frontiersman gear. You can get a Glencairn. You can get these t-shirts, which are really cool. And we're still working on getting Tina some. I know this is the highest priced one, but it really is the best t-shirt. They're all good, but this thing is so comfortable, it's unbelievable. So go check out frontiersmanadventures.com. And now we'll go back to Les Odell. And Les, I sure appreciate you coming in. It's some really great stories, a lot of paranormal stuff, a lot of Bigfoot stuff. And maybe we'll do one more story.
Sure.
There was, I've got a little prop here. Because there's a story in there about a white Bigfoot that was like hugging a tree.
Yeah.
Like this. Tell us about that.
That was in, was it Lincoln or Logan?
I think that was in Lincoln, wasn't it?
Okay.
No, I'm not sure. Let me look.
Because I have a Bigfoot story. I have a Bigfoot encounter from both Lincoln and Logan that were white.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, tell whichever one you can remember, because I was reading that one earlier. That's the girl that's on page 53 in Lincoln County. And I guess it was a girl, might have been a guy.
No, this was a lady. If that's the one where they're hunting the mushrooms.
Yes.
Yes, that was a young lady. Yeah.
The Molly Moochers.
Yeah. The interesting part to that one that I remember her telling me were the eyes. She said they were this blue color. They were like a light blue, like crystal like blue is what she told me on the phone.
Wow.
But her and her dad, mom, and I think, was there another person?
Yeah, that she had step kids, step brother and sisters or something.
Well, anyway, they were out hunting for morels. She, if I remember right, she goes off to it on her own. She catches it, she smells something, I think, and then she hears a noise. And as she looks up, the first thing she sees are these feet, big feet on both, one on each side of the tree, and they're like white, dirty white, grayish white, whatever you want to call it. And it's like holding on the tree, kind of leaning out, looking at her, and it grunts, or if I remember right, it grunts, and she takes off. So
yeah,
that's a shortened version, what I can remember. Yeah,
right. And her story wasn't that long anyway. That was about it. But that's how old was she? She about 15, I think she said, or something.
Yeah, she was in her teens.
16, yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't remember exactly how old, but she was in her teens.
Mm.
Yep, 16. I was with my
Yeah, that's something to see.
Yeah, my mom, stepdad, and siblings. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one, since you got the white one there, and I don't remember if I actually have this one in the book, to be honest with you. Young guy, it was in Logan, pretty sure it was Logan County.
Mm-hmm.
He snuck out of his house, went to his girlfriend's house, and was coming home at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And there was a property near his home that was kind of a derelict property, I guess. It kind of run down. And the grass was kind of high, but there was power there, and it had a motion light out in the yard. And he noticed this motion light would come on as he's walking, and then it would go off, and then it'd come on, and then it'd go off. Well, as he walks by, he sees this white thing in the yard in the tall grass, and he told me, he's like, and for the life of me, he said, I don't know why I did this, but he said I looked at it, toward it, and went, hey, because this thing's like face on all, like kind of down on all fours, just squatted down, facing away from him, and he said it turned toward him, and it looked like a white ape in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing on all fours charged him. He said, like a silverback gorilla would do, kind of that, I guess, in the nature like that. He takes off running, but apparently he's like, it didn't follow him because he didn't look back. But apparently it didn't follow him because, he got home and didn't have any other experiences or anything else happen. So.
Wow. The white one's interesting to me. You think it's the abominable snowman, but you remember Scott Carpenter?
Yeah.
Who wrote Truth Denied and all that. But he had on a back camera one time as he's walking, and he didn't see it, but as he's showing the video, one of his viewers said, hey, Scott, there's something that peeps up. And so Scott went and looked at the video, and lo and behold, there was this thing that with it on his back camera, it looked up, and then it went back down, but you can see it was white with the dark eye, like eyes were set. Do you remember seeing that?
I don't remember if I remember seeing that one. That's not the same one where they call the Pennsylvania Bigfoot, the white one where they're panning and it's standing there. It's all white, got the dark eye like sockets.
Yes, I've seen that. That's not the same one,
okay.
But I know one you're talking about. Yeah, that's a crazy one too. Yeah. Scott was just walking. He was in Tennessee in the Smokies. So
yeah, I don't think I remember. I know who he was. But I thought because he used to do a lot of gifting and stuff.
Yes.
And I thought it was really cool because he's I think he was probably the first one I ever seen that gifted and would put rocks like in a certain area, and he'd place them, and he'd come back and the rocks would be separated. There'd be like one here and like two here or three here, and he theorized that what that was meaning is they were telling him there's one of you and three of us. And so,
oh my gosh!
So I thought that was pretty neat. I mean, it's all a theory, but I thought that was pretty cool. A lot of people, it's kind of thinking out of the box and stuff, but it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I liked him. He passed away. And
yeah,
sad. He and David Plaitis were very good friends, but that's some crazy stuff. But now I lost my train of thought. There was one other thing, but I forgot what I was going to say. So,
heat stroke.
Do what?
I
know, man. I'm telling you what. I felt like I was going to have heat exhaustion today, but I know what I was going to say. Well, Scott Carpenter also said that he had a dog man encounter.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he had gone hiking into an area that he usually didn't hike, you know, where he normally had a lot of Bigfoot interactions. He went to a different area. And he said all of a sudden he got this, like, kind of like a fear come over him. And so he looks over and he sees this thing. It's up in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and he's got it on camera too. He's got it on film. Like, not the best footage, like it never is it? But the thing leans out. And he said it was the most evil looking thing he'd ever seen. And he said, I knew that I had to get out of there. And that was crazy just to hear him talk about that. So you might, if I can find the video, I'll send you the link. But,
sweet. Yeah, Dogman is it's weird. It's a subject that's kind of unnerving. I mean, because if you look at Bigfoot, you can justify Bigfoot being there. You know, we know we have great apes, and as far as it being an animal, I guess you'd say,
right?
And we have primitive or ancient humans. Like some people, because a lot of stories they talk about them look more human than animalistic. So whether they're primitive man that's still here, that's possible. It could be possible. A great ape, undiscovered great ape, is possible, and it could be possible. But an upright walking dog, man,
like a werewolf.
Yeah, that's just like movie stuff, and it doesn't fit anything that we know. So
well, the only thing I would say, to me, they're kind of like skinwalkers. That's my theory.
Yeah.
Because where he's seeing him is in Cherokee. Other areas that you've seen him is probably often in Native American areas as well. Of course, that's all of Appalachia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much.
I mean, you talk about skinwalker and shapeshifters and stuff like that. I've taken a couple stories Bigfoot related that has like kind of things like that. But now I'm looking into a little bit. People have contacted me about the whole not deer phenomenon. Have you heard that?
The what is it?
Not deer. It's called not deer, where these people are seeing what looks like deer, or somewhat look like deer. But they'll have features that are not deer-like. They'll have like a human face, or they move different. They'll have forward-facing eyes, or something like that.
That's crazy.
The two that I've taken, two reports I've taken here in my area, both times the deer stands up and walks around on two legs, or the one time it ran off. It didn't walk. It ran off. The other time, the lady was coming down the road and sees this thing, thinking it was going to walk out in front of her. Deer was going to come up, and it just stands up right along the road, watches her go by, stares at her. She goes by. She can see it in the mirror, and then like kind of side shuffles and steps out into the road and watches her drive off. And then she sees it. She looks down, as it was around another turn. She can look down and look back, and this deer just turns, walks over the hill on two legs, walks through the brush down toward the creek. And the other one
sounds like a what do they call them? Wendigos or something?
Well, Wendigo, see, that's the thing where a lot of people get to miss, they're kind of confused by Wendigo. Wendigo is more like a evil spirit thing.
Okay.
Where a person is I guess kind of possessed by like this evil spirit, and then it turns in, basically they turn cannibalistic. But the whole antlers and skin, wearing the skin of a deer and stuff like that, that's part of the Wendigo lore, but not really an actual deer.
Right.
But the skinwalker stuff, I shouldn't say skinwalker. You're supposed to say that. Should say flesh pedestrian, I guess you'd say. But that is the whole shape shifting thing, and that I can't figure out if it's more like spiritual thing, or if it's more like we can get into that, we could talk about that forever too, but like more like fae related, like is this, you have all the that kind of stuff. But what I was going to get to is I took a report here, like I told you, I take weird stuff too. I'll talk to anybody, whatever they want to tell me.
Yeah.
A guy called me. A guy got a hold of me. Said, "I'm a truck driver. I deliver milk for a dairy outside of Oak Hill, West Virginia, down next in Nicholas County." And he said, "I'm driving." He said, "I see this thing in the road." He said, "Well, the first thing what I think it is, or what it looks like to me, is it's a big hairy ape. That's upright, standing, big hairy ape." And he slows down and comes to a stop. And he said, "I'm within 75 to 100 feet away from this thing." And he's looking at it, and it's turned toward him. Takes a couple steps toward him, and he notices, and as this step toward him, he's getting like anxious or whatever, or however you want to say it. He said, "I kind of let off the brake a little bit, and I start to drift or start to move." And that's when this thing, to him, says, looks like it's starting to go onto all fours or whatever. He said, but as it goes down, it changes. He said it goes from this hairy ape looking thing, changed into a buck deer, and runs off into the woods. So who knows what that is? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, and I asked him, I said, "Man, are you sure you weren't drinking? Are you sure you weren't doing, No, he said, "I was at work." He said, "I was working." He said, it was late at night. Yeah. He said, "I was delivering milk." He said, "That's what I seen." So,
Wow. That's crazy. Well, I guess we're going to wrap it up. We're almost at 2 hours.
yep.
I know you could tell stories, and I loved it every second listening to your stories, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and maybe we'll be in the same room, and that would probably be even better sometime to do that. But I hope everybody enjoyed it. I mean, we've had, I think, a steady amount of followers the whole time, so that's good. And then we'll post it on YouTube and see if we get more views. So
absolutely.
But you're going to tell us where you're going to be next or upcoming.
Tomorrow is the first day of the Grafton Monster Festival. It's a 2-day event. I can't make the first day, but I will be at the dinner. There's a meet and greet tomorrow evening. Can't remember the actual location.
Saturday evening, the meet and greet?
No, it's tomorrow and Friday.
Okay.
And then on Saturday, I'll be at the festival. I'm the first speaker. I can't remember if it's 10 or 11. I'm the first speaker on Saturday at the Grafton Festival, or Grafton Monster Festival. Then June. Let me make sure I get the dates right. 26, 27, 28 is the West Virginia Bigfoot Festival. I'll be there all 3 days. I'll be speaking at a couple of those days. I can't remember right offhand which day. I think it might be Friday and Saturday. So be there. No,
that's Sutton, right?
Sutton, West Virginia. Yeah, it's going to be at Holly Gray Park. It's a 3-day event. A lot of people show up.
Yeah, that's looks like a fun event. And of course, we're going to be in Las Vegas, or actually on those days we'll be at the Grand Canyon. But I told Tina that I'm going to start making these events to meet people and to listen to you, because got to support my buddy there. So
thank you.
But Steve Hickey says, Les, if you come to Roanoke, I'd love to meet you. So yeah, if we get him in Roanoke, we'll maybe maybe we'll line up a meeting in Roanoke somewhere where you can speak. I'll work on that. And I might even speak.
There you go.
People might throw stuff at me, but that's all right. All right, guys. We appreciate you so much, Les. I appreciate everybody coming in. There's Squatch and Holler. Heck yeah, I love the bourbon. But we'll do it again. Be safe traveling this weekend. And I'll be in touch soon. Any last words?
I just thank everybody for coming. I mean, I've been trying to watch. For some reason, I couldn't sign in on the chat, but I've been trying to watch everybody that commented on there. I know it's probably a little distracting, but I was trying to. Thank you guys for having me come on, and I have a good time.
And around here, we always say, always keep it squatchy.
Yeah.
So, on the Frontiersman channel.
There you go.
Keep it squatchy, and we'll see you soon. And thank you so much. And there's Bill Coleman, the GOAT himself. We love Bill Coleman. So I'll talk to you soon, Les. Take care. Have a good night.
All right. We'll see you.
All right. Bye-bye.